baby boomers.
I used to be with it.
Millennials.
Okay, boomer.
Generation X.
What's going on?
And Gen Z. What do they have in common? Not a lot, it turns out. But one thing they can agree on is that this is the political podcast they want to listen to. Welcome to Not My Generation, the political podcast that looks at political events, news, and happenings across the world and at home through a generational lens. Your hosts are Dr. Emily Stacy and Professor James Davenport, two political scientists from Rose State College. But the views expressed on this program are solely the views of the host and their guests and do not reflect the views of Rose State College, its administration, faculty, or students. Coming up on today's program. Hey, don't say it like that.
Yeah, that's my most controversial position is that I vote.
Air the dirty laundry.
Elon Musk has ruined my favorite place on earth.
I hope my mom doesn't listen to this.
And now, here are James and Emily. Hey, Emily, how are you?
Alive. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm excited about our podcast today. We've got some great folks in the studio in the fabulous Possibilities Inc. studio. And our fantastic producer, Peaches, is over there doing the marvelous work to make this all be professional and
I like the
wonderful.
over there for the listeners,
well,
right?
She's over
it
on
says
the
like
other
over
side,
there,
on
right?
the other side of the window.
You could be more
right?
descriptive about things, James.
The other side of the window.
Yes.
But before we jump into that, we've had a Republican presidential campaign that went, the last time we recorded, went from like 5 candidates down to 2, kind of, maybe.
Let's say 1.5.
1.5. Yeah. We don't know yet.
1.25, maybe.
I think we'll know after South Carolina.
I think we already know about South Carolina.
It's
don't get me started on Tim Scott. I've got things I can't say on the podcast.
I'm probably pretty close to where you are about that too. Anyway, so that was interesting to see how. What was interesting was to see how all of these folks drop out and immediately, except for
Kiss the Ring,
Chris Christie.
Well, yeah,
right. Everybody else out and line up behind Mr. Trump. Right.
It's an inevitability. We are in a twilight zone of 2020.
I guess. Anyway, we have some great guests on the program today. We have Carmen Forman, who this is her second appearance.
I just informed her she's the only repeat guest we've had.
Right. And then the marvelous, fantastic.
So many adjectives.
Whatever superlative you want to throw out. Trey Savage from Non-Doc.
Thank you. Welcome to be here for my first time.
Yes.
We'll have you more often. You're a busy dude. You're hard to nail down, dude.
What is the policy on cussing in this podcast?
We have the ability to bleep you out.
Well, you said all the adjectives, and I was famously called a bag by this guy pushing a bill at the Capitol. So there are legions of people who know me by that moniker.
That tracks. I've known Trace for a very long time.
Hey, listen, I've been called a variety of names as well, so it's okay. It's all good.
I almost feel left out. I don't have any nicknames like that.
Yeah.
Well, thank goodness the legislative session is about to resume, so there's always time.
There's time, man.
Yeah.
You're young, Carmen.
All right. Well, we've got some icebreaker questions we want to throw out. You guys, do you want to go first or you want me to?
Yeah, because I think this is really going to break your heart just a little bit. Just a little bit, because I already know. So question 1, are you Gen X, millennial, or other? Carmen?
I think I'm a millennial. I'm definitely not Gen X.
Hey,
I don't have TikTok.
Say it like that.
Don't
say it like
I'm sorry.
Certainly not Gen X.
I'm certainly not Gen Z.
I don't know the answer to this
you
question.
You and I are millennials. We are elder millennials. Yes.
So people, the real question,
as the youngsters refer to you as the.
What? Oh, geriatric. He loves this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Now, do we need to inform listeners of the fact that we went to middle school together?
We went,
I didn't know that.
And we hated each other.
Yes.
Like mutually despised one another.
And we just ended up in the same realm.
Right. 10 years later.
Mm-hmm. E-Capital. Yeah, Darwin hired the both of us. Yeah. Like one right after the other, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks apart.
And it was, I think I walked in, I saw you, and you looked at me, and I looked at you. And it was like, okay. And then we became really good friends. It turned out like we liked each other more than pretty much everybody else. So
Which is we needed to adult a little bit, I think, to appreciate each other.
yeah.
Yes.
But
we're very proud of Trey Savage. He's a good dude.
So we have a detente in that we're not going to, neither of us is going to tell stories
Exactly.
of the other one
No
from
more.
high school.
Come
No.
on.
Exactly.
No, we are now a union. We've teamed up against the two of you.
Come on, air the dirty laundry.
You are
No,
very.
this is a detente. This is a truce. Ceasefire has been in force for about 5 years.
We'll figure this out.
Yeah, don't answer anything that James Davenport asks you.
All right, second question. What are you currently reading, watching, or listening to?
Well, I have been jamming to the new John R. Miller album for a couple months.
Okay.
He's got a great, he's from West Virginia, singer-songwriter, really good guitar player. And he's got I think the first single on his latest album is called Conspiracies, Cults, and UFOs. And it's a really good song. The album is called Heat Comes Down. So if you're kind of like a John Prine or a Tyler Childers kind of fan, that's pretty good. Is what I'm watching. I recently have decided to watch the entire series from BBC called Endeavour, which is like the prequel to the Inspector Morse series. Okay. As my father taught me as a child, no one reads mystery novels for the plot. It's all about the social commentary. And this is very interesting British social commentary in the early 60s. Then I think it ends in the early 70s. So.
Trace's answers are a lot better than mine because I have been reading this Sarah J. Maas like fantasy novels that are like super thick and on all over TikTok, which I'm not on, or Book Talk, I should say. And she has a new book coming out, and so I'm just running through these like 800-page kind of cheesy romantic fantasy novels. I don't know why, and then I don't know. Watching Seinfeld every once in a while. Just going back to that. Yeah.
You are now my favorite
I need
guest ever.
a laugh here and there.
You
so
are my favorite guest ever.
Yeah, I saw a meme making around, or not a meme, but just like a diagram, and it was talking about, it blew my mind, Jerry's hallway can't exist. That if you think of where, if you look at how the kitchen is laid out and where that door is, there can't possibly be a hallway that's straight the way you see the hallway. And now I think it's...
Your mind is blown.
I know. I'm never going to be able to unsee it.
That's great. Favorite social media platform?
I hate them all.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Instagram, if I had to choose one.
Oh, X, I guess.
I know,
if I had
right?
I guess if I had to...
I can't
Is it
get
your
on
favorite,
it.
or is it the one that you use the most?
Yeah, use the most. I
Both
do.
for me.
Facebook has become useless.
Don't
It's
say
funny
that.
because
That
when we
hurts my
started
heart.
Non-Doc in late 2015, I mean, Facebook accounted for more than 50% of the traffic that we would get, and you would have, every post would have, a lot of interaction and people, and to the extent that people would like freak out on us sometimes. It was a place where there was a lot of robust discussion, and organic reach has plummeted. Their ad system is useless. It can't actually micro-target anymore, as far as I can tell. I was just trying to give someone access to our page the other day, and it was like a 25-minute like deep dive into various settings, platforms, and all these. I mean, they have built, and it's become almost dysfunctional, as a product. And I still contend that there will be some sort of litigation at some point when sort of large advertisers realize that the eyeball numbers that they're being sold on ads, like they just can't possibly be real. I don't, not to throw that out there in a way where they, scan the internet using AI and hear me and send me cease and desist letters. But like, it's just like when we've purchased stuff, like it's just the delay is so bad and all this stuff, they're backfilling eyeballs. If there's a power outage situation, like think about all the eyes they've promised in that like 6-hour period. Where does that go? How does that, it's in the fine print somewhere, I'm sure, but it's just so dysfunctional. So we are trying to think about how do we get, news content out other ways than Facebook. And in fact, I actually had a Facebook I don't want to say an executive, but like a corporate team member spoke to the Oklahoma Media Center, and we asked some of these questions, and she literally said, you probably just need to find other ways to get news content out than Facebook. And it was blunt about it and was just basically like, this is not a platform for news producers and news distributors.
Yikes. Yeah. After the ethics incident back in 2013, 2014, I was at the Oxford Internet Summer Doctoral Program. And so a bunch of, internet nerds, social media, like researchers. And that was the summer that it had come out that they had been tracking people's emotions, right? So playing with Facebook users' news feeds, putting good news in some feeds on top and others at the bottom, and kind of tracking people's emotions after that. And as an academic, they didn't tell anybody that they were doing this, right? And so this huge trove of data cannot be used by social scientists because Facebook is completely unethical. So yeah, I've not ever been, but I also cannot. I refer to it as that formerly known as Twitter. I cannot. Elon Musk has ruined my favorite place on earth. I will never call it that letter.
Oh, it was already
me.
terrible, though.
It was terrible.
Already terrible.
But man, the ads, I'm getting so much nonsense now. So much more nonsense.
You know what my favorite social media was, and it no longer exists? Vine. You remember
I like Vine.
Yeah.
6 seconds of a looped video. It could only be so stupid. There was a limit on, and I liked that.
Yeah.
It couldn't be more than it was,
I love it. What's your favorite social media? No, you just blanket no.
She said Insta.
Instagram, if I have to choose, but it's like the same thing with the ads all over the place now. It's like,
I don't know, dude.
why even bother?
Until they change the URL name, I'm going to keep calling it Twitter because it's still Twitter. It's if I log on, I got to go to twitter.com.
They can't rebrand.
So
that.
It's still Twitter. I don't care. I don't care about anything else.
Samesies.
So
all right, you got to get through these questions,
I know,
bro.
I know.
You are killing me.
Favorite pastime, activity, or hobby?
Horseshoes.
Yoga.
All right. Very good.
Good enough. All right, last one. One political view that puts you at odds with your peer group, colleagues, or family.
Well, I
didn't write
once
this.
did a podcast. Carmen, weren't you on the podcast that we did with Ben Felder, and we had a whole discussion on whether journalists should vote?
Yes, we did.
And I vote.
Yeah,
I'm
I
a
vote
voter.
too. Yeah.
And some people in the journalism world claim that you're not.
Really?
We're
That you
supposed to be
shouldn't vote?
unbiased.
Really?
And
then you dive into the whole, like some in journalism think that you have to be a registered independent. And
I am a registered independent.
I am too.
Yeah.
But like some people are like very journalistically opposed to you registering as a political party.
Wow.
Yeah. In most states, it doesn't, some states, it doesn't really matter, right? Because you don't have closed primaries.
Right.
Here, I don't know.
That's really interesting.
So, that's my most controversial position is that I vote.
Hot take. Hot take. Trace is a Democratic citizen. Oh, no.
How dare you?
I know, right?
Oh man, I hope my mom doesn't listen to this, but every time she calls me now, she wants to talk about what's happening in Israel. And I'm just like, I don't want to talk about this.
Yep.
And so maybe that's everybody wants to talk about that issue right now. I don't want to say a word. I don't want to have a conversation about it. Sure. Like, no, thank you.
Yep. That's a great answer.
Very good. All right. So we are, this episode is focusing on the upcoming legislative session. I guess we should actually say two. We've got a special session and then the regular session. And I don't know why we have a special session except someone still hasn't learned how to play well with others. Did I? Yes, I said that out loud.
I mean, which one? There are several.
Well, the one who called the special session.
Okay, fine.
Right?
Fine.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I was having this conversation with somebody just the other day, and a conversation on is Governor Stitt, by calling this special session, which isn't functionally going to do much other than, put House members on a vote, which, they'll have some tax cut votes, maybe a couple different versions. Carmen, we can chat about, what we anticipate potentially. But it was a question of, does this help him, hurt him? Does he look foolish? What's the impact? And we sort of came to a conclusion that from an outside the building perspective, from across the state of Oklahoma, if you didn't like the governor already, you think this is a big stupid move. If you liked the governor and you think he's sticking it to the stupid legislature who can't get things done, you probably like the move, right? But then what I sort of said was, and so that's why I think it's potentially a bad decision to kind of call this, is because the bigger impact is in the building.
Yeah. And it could hurt him the whole 4 months of the regular session.
Right. Sure. Right. Is that in the message that it sends in the building is one of continued, I think some of the senators would say continued, a range of adjectives from disrespect to you're not listening to us, you're not hearing us.
You're not respecting us as another branch of government.
We did this in October. You called this. You wanted to have this conversation. We invited you to the Senate A and B meeting to testify and offer your plan on how we should cut this income tax. You said, meh, and held your own press conference instead. And so we just gavelled out and went home. And now, without very much other discussion or anything really changing, we have even a more narrow call a week before regular session starts. And not just a week before regular session starts, but 2 weeks before they get the final estimated numbers from the Board of Equalization, which, we hope there's no major change in the economy. But, we saw a few years ago, the price of oil turned negative overnight. You have things that could change dramatically in the next 3 or 4 weeks.
I mean, how many headlines have I seen this week that gas prices are now below $3, which is great for drivers, not so great for state revenue, Yeah.
So I think that if you're the Senate, even though everybody's obviously playing politics with all this, if you're the state Senate, there's plenty of reason to be able to say, yeah, we're not doing this song and dance just because you wrote it on a piece of paper,
Well, this is what I don't understand. So, as you mentioned, he called this special session in October. Treat basically says, come tell us what you think and why we should do this. He doesn't. Between October and now, apparently, he's not coordinated with anybody. He hasn't met with Treat and said, here's what I would like to do. Do you think we could? None of that has happened. And he comes back and says, I'm going to have another special session. As you said, more narrowly focused, right? And Treat's like, what's changed? You still haven't visited with us. You still haven't. And
and I think it's a little bit of a both ways haven't visited. My understanding is that Pro Tem Treat and Governor Stitt's relationship has really, taken a hiatus in conversations.
I don't doubt.
And I don't know that anything's happened to repair it or get on the same page, to your point, James.
I get the feeling, and you guys are down there a lot more than I am, but I get the feeling that Treat's getting tired of the governor assuming he can just tell the legislature what it's going to do, and they're supposed to jump to his demands, and that he's getting pretty tired of that. Is that?
I think that would be
fair?
accurate.
Yeah.
I think it also, however, I think parallel to that, the Senate caucus has been fairly messy for a couple of years, and it's not aligned. There's not clear direction. I mean, if you just go back to the summer with the first swing at the compact veto override,
failed. One of them
supposedly they didn't even know that they didn't have the votes. Yeah. Now, I don't know that I fully believe that, but I think, and then I was actually thinking about this, and maybe this will be the first place that I've even floated this notion, is if we look at how the 2024 session could play out for this tax question. Traditionally, your thinking would be, well, what's the number one goal of both chambers and every caucus in a legislative session? It's to guarantee that everybody gets reelected, right? Like that's the cynical place that they're operating from, right? Well, you think, okay, we've got an election year coming up. Yeah, all these Republicans are going to want to, have a tax cut in their belt to go back and run for reelection at home, right? Well, that may be true in the House where everybody's up for election. Right. But if you look at the Senate, A, not everybody's up for election. Right. And B, if you look at the number of what are going to be open seats, it's more than half a dozen. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have a lot of members, Cody Rogers, Joe Newhouse, Tom Duggar, even Dom, although I'm sure he's Standridge. I'm sure they would like to have their legacy be that they forced through a tax cut. I'm sure, but I'll ask Senator Dom next time I go to renew my journalism license what his opinion is. But there's not necessarily as much pressure as you might think for this election year kind of thing. Now Blake Cowboy Stevens, running in a redrawn district where he's got to introduce himself to half a broken arrow. Yeah, he may want to have, something really taken care of, but it's not like, it's not like the folks, a lot of the folks in leadership of the Senate or even rank and file members. It's not like a lot of them have tough reelection situations coming up. You've got Bergstrom and you've got Blake Stevens. And everybody else is kind of, I don't know that I have to have this done.
Yeah, kind of coast to reation, assuming nothing crazy happens.
Or may not even be running. And, and so I think that, it dawned on me like literally last night that was a situation. And I wondered if that takes a little bit of the pressure off that you would normally think, that you think the House, boy, they're going to be wanting to deliver something to keep people, and traditionally, just for people's knowledge, right? Like April is the filing period. So you often have the chambers are wanting to get a couple things done ahead of the filing period so that, in the Republican caucus anyway, you're able to look at some of the folks on maybe the, who are a little more conservative or further right politically, you want to kind of cut off their lane to say, well, I have cut taxes. I have, taken action on school choice. I have done these things on, that was the big fear in the Republican caucus last year is if they didn't do something on school choice, they were going to get an onslaught of candidates challenging incumbents.
Yeah. So do we think, just kind of piggybacking on this, are there going to be as many or maybe more uncontested races?
I don't know. I was actually looking just this morning at what the Senate outline is, and there's a lot of, those open seats, a lot of them have already drawn several candidates.
Yeah, and some of the folks from the House are trying to jump over to the Senate, like Representative Boatman and Regina Goodwin. And then the House seems to have a fair amount who aren't running again, like Sherry Conley, Marcus McIntyre.
Right.
But I wouldn't say it's like an abnormal amount.
Maybe that's a good segue to talk about like what else we anticipate this session, because I think, if we look at how the 2023 regular session unfolded, and then of course, the concurrent special that they ran the budget bills through to not let Stitt be able to veto things without an override effort. If we look at how that unfolded, it really sucked the air out of the room for a ton of other policy. And so there's a lot of...
So much got left on the table.
Right. So much got left on the table that actually, I think, and we, fact check me, Peaches, or, but whoever the Tony Reale is of, at the end of this show, I don't think there were as many new bills filed this year as people might generally expect, because so much policy that was tied up last year is still tied up and still active rounds in a lot of ways. And you said Marcus McIntyre, and that made me think he's got a bill that I think it's in this. I can't remember. I think it was a Senate bill, and now he has it, and it's about like mid-level nurse practitioner. Scope of practice, prescriptive authority, all those sorts of things. And there's some kind of questions about what the amendments are going to look like on that. But that, my understanding, is something that could run very early. Okay. And we may see. So, it's interesting, Carmen, like if we describe the normal process, okay, newly filed bills, they go to a committee of origin first. Well, when those House committees hit, they could have a bunch of Senate bills on them day one.
And they could be voting on Senate bills on the House floor first week.
Right.
The governor could be have stuff to sign within the first couple weeks of session, which always blows my mind when we're...
Yeah, for folks who maybe aren't super familiar.
2-year legislative system.
This is the 59th legislature, so a bill that is introduced in the first year, which is an odd-numbered year, it's still alive through that second year. Now, if
so long as it didn't get a vote down.
Right. So if it failed in the first year, you can't even run a new bill of the same topic. Right. It has to be different. So, we've still got a lot of stuff that's alive. There's still all those vetoes that were held, so the judicial, what is it? The judicial evaluation or the judicial
pay
training.
raises for state employees or the state elected officials. Didn't that get, that's bound to come back.
And did that get vetoed?
Or no, it got dropped at the last days of the budget.
No, it got voted down in the Senate. It was, the Senate voted down Wallace's judicial evaluation thing. And then, which there's a lot of, my understanding is maybe there's been some acquiescence on that on the district judge level. Part of that is every 2 years, the Board on Judicial Compensation meets, and they recommended a 17% pay raise, I think it was. So if the legislature takes no action, that 17% goes into effect. If the legislature says absolutely not, they kill it, there's no raise. Or the legislature can say, well, we'll do 9 or 10 or 12%, which generally is what the Board on Judicial Compensation calculates is, well, we'll ask for a lot more because we know we're only going to get half of whatever we ask. But my point is all those dynamics are at play. And to Carmen's point, some of those bills are still technically alive for consideration.
And there was like a bunch of stuff that they didn't get to last year. I mean, like the sentencing reform that they've been talking about for years, and I don't fully understand. Sorry, listeners, but that's still in the works. I mean, I think last year they had started to talk about giving state employees pay raises, and then there was no time or money to discuss it further, I guess.
Yeah, I think they've rebranded sentencing reform to sentencing modernization, is my understanding.
That sounds
nice.
More fun.
Yeah. It's like in other states, they're looking at Oklahoma and they're like, they called the school choice vouchers tax credits.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's all that happened. Let's call them tax credits. We'll pass them too.
Semantics, yay. I love it. You look itchy. What's I know, right? Yes.
No.
You should fear that face.
But let's talk about. So it is an election year.
Itchy.
We've already seen
itchy and scratchy show.
We've already seen some interesting bills filed. What stands out to you? Do any of these have any chance of actually going anywhere? That's always one of my criticisms is some legislator files some bill more than likely just to get attention, has no real, not going to make any real effort to move this legislation, and people freak out over it. They just go up in arms.
I'm really concerned about the furries in my daughter's public school.
You mean to tell me that Representative J.J. Humphrey is not always a serious broker of legislative proposals?
I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just saying. I am just saying that. But does anything stand out to you? And of those that stand out, do any of those things do you think have an opportunity to actually move to get action?
I mean, past couple of weeks, we've seen a lot of journalists and other people tweeting, oh, here's this wild bill or that outrageous bill that has been filed. And what I like to remind people is that they don't do this in the Senate so much, but in the House, there's just a ton of shell bills. And what I find is that as you go through session, those shell bills that become real bills, somebody pops some language in it, and those are often more, concerning, alarming to some, and those are the ones that actually have legs. It's not the ones that get filed before the bill filing deadline that are made to put on a campaign flyer or go out in a House press release or a Senate press release just to get somebody some attention.
Right.
Or literally troll, journalists.
Yes. Now, my understanding in the House is they're limited to the number of bills that they're not necessarily limited to the number of bills they can author. They can author a bunch of shell bills, but they're limited in the number of bills that they can actually try to move forward, right? So 7 or 8 that they can say, I'm serious about this. And those are the bills we should be watching, right? The ones that they actually get assigned to a committee and they're going to try to move through in some way. Right?
Yeah. And then, it's always, you can look on the national stage and see, what are Republicans pushing there? They're pushing back against, transgender kids still and anti-LGBTQ bills and then, more restrictions on abortion, even though we basically outlawed abortion here.
Well, and that's an interesting, I haven't even talked to anybody yet about what may occur on abortion. The Senate, speaking of, disagreements, they had a pretty significant disagreement last year as some of the Supreme Court rulings were coming down. should the legislature, codify some exemptions for, instances of rape and incest, right? Which is a small number of all abortions done every year. But it's also from this is almost gross to calculate it from a political standpoint, but there will be I think a public vote at some point in Oklahoma on where we draw the line, right? And like that's sort of the function of the recent Supreme Court ruling, right? Is that it says like each state sets their policy, and so there will be some sort of question. Now, if the language that gets put to the voters in Oklahoma says, second trimester or third, if it's a long, that might fail. If it's a narrow window, I think that probably has a decent chance of passing. If you look at Kansas, I know some, Republican women who, they're not standing on the street corner shouting it, but they'll vote for, having women have the ability to have, choice. And I think if you look, so the political calculation that some people were having in the Senate last year, and I don't want to say specific senators on which side because it's been a minute since I revisited this, but some people believed that they needed to pass some codification of rape and incest exemptions because if it didn't,
to try to heat off a ballot measure,
right? That is a compelling, political argument or advertisement for folks who are pro-choice, and so the Senate has been very split. You have your sort of abortion abolitionist world, Warren Hamilton group, probably more Dom, that kind of world who's just absolutely, we're not going to do anything, hold the line, no access, criminal penalties, all these things.
But then you have like the Julie Daniels types who has introduced a number of our anti-abortion laws over the years and gotten them passed. And now she's the one behind the push to, add exceptions for rape and incest.
Yeah, she's not happy about it, right? She feels like she didn't agree with the Supreme Court decisions, but she felt like, that the state needed to have a workable law for those scenarios. And so, you have that split in the legislature. And it's going to be interesting to see if there's, amid all these other things that are going on, is there robust discussion about that? Or is it just another thing where, we're not going to touch it? Because in some ways, if you're Charles McCall and it's widely believed you're looking at a Republican gubernatorial primary, you don't want one of your last, efforts on abortion
to be on something that could be construed as pro-choice.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So again, we're talking about the politics of it versus the healthcare of it, which is,
You brought up a good point, though, that, this is an election year and this is kind of the year that the legislature will decide what, if anything, they refer to the ballot, because usually, so they could refer their own abortion question to the ballot if they wanted to heat off some sort of,
Emily and I were having this discussion the other day, and I am surprised that there hasn't been an effort to get a state question on this issue. We've seen its success in Kansas, in Ohio, in Michigan, in other states. That voters have carved out some type of protection for abortion in limited cases or whatnot. And I've just been surprised that there wasn't an effort kind of to put something like that as a state question on the ballot. I wasn't thinking it coming from kind of the right? I wasn't thinking of it coming from Republican politicians who want to narrow whatever those exceptions are. But
I think my best guess as to why that hasn't happened yet is because you would need a lot of money to shepherd that ballot initiative into a winning position, basically. Like one, I think Trace is right that you have to be very careful in how you write that question for voters to make it pass or to hopefully make it, if you want to hope that it passes. But then two, I think you need the big money from groups like Planned Parenthood, and groups like Planned Parenthood are more focused on states where they perceive that they have a better chance of winning. And so maybe they'll start there and then move to states like Oklahoma. That's my guess.
I don't know. Part of, I think, why we don't know, speaks to the challenges that the the Democratic Party and sort of the political left of Oklahoma have. And when I say challenges, I mean, I have a friend who sort of jokes like, when you say the Democratic Party of Oklahoma, like, what do you mean? Like, what is that? And I don't mean that to be in an insulting way, but like, it is just, I'm not clear. I don't get outreach to. I don't like. There's not. I'm not clear where these things sort of come from. I know that former Governor Walters has been, historically supportive of certain ballot measures and some, progressive efforts, and he's sort of a leader in that realm. I know there's, a coordinated effort underway on the minimum wage, and that state question is going through the legal challenge process right now. And that's, so maybe there's a calculation of, hey, that's a good one for 2024. And then maybe we look at, an abortion question in 25 or 26. I don't know. But I think that does speak to the question of, Carmen, if you were to say who's in charge of those decisions for sort of the political left in Oklahoma, I don't know that it's clear who is.
No, I mean, there's that one group that formed We Are Rising. That I think if there were to be a ballot measure effort, they would be behind it. But I mean, there is no.
I think I got an email about that group, but I mean, I don't.
There's no structure behind, the Democrat. Well, I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but they're not as organized.
I don't think that's a controversial statement. I think everybody would.
It's not.
No. If you look at the newly released voter registration stats for the state, the Democrat Party continues to bleed registered voters, right?
What, 7%?
The only party to actually have a decline in the number of voters over the previous year, right? And they're down to like 28% of the state of registered voters. If you combine independents and libertarians, you're at roughly 20%. I mean, there's no infrastructure there as a party. And we continue to see this in races, especially statewide races, where the Democrat Party can't even field candidates for some of these statewide offices.
Right.
Yeah. And I think if you look at the recent, now I'll get myself in trouble, but if we look at the recent, MAPS Arena vote in Oklahoma City, the opposition was, sort of a couple similar grassroots activists, largely led by kind of two white male polarizing figures, who are not, have not shown a proclivity to win, major races even in Oklahoma County. And so I think that, if you look around and you go, well, who is going to maybe push that? I do not know the answer to that question.
Well, and again, this goes back to how what people consider conservative today is way different than what I grew up thinking conservative. But I think a ballot measure that said there's going to be some protection for right to obtain an abortion for the rape, incest, life of the mother within some narrowish window.
Well, I think you could go further than that.
That used to be the pro-life position.
But I do think yeah, sure, that used to be the pro-life position. You're right, but I do think you would have. I think it would have to have some sort of choice without those circumstances, right? Yeah. Within first trimester, within 16 weeks, or forgive me, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head.
I think something in that would probably pass. If you put it to voters,
pretty close, right?
If you put it to voters,
because I think there's a lot of women who are independents and Republicans who, as long as it's not viewed as something very broad, and I think who are going to go, I don't want myself or my child to be in a situation where they could not.
Especially as these stories come out of Texas and other states where, women are in desperation.
When we did the gubernatorial debate in October 2022, wow, that was so long ago, we phrased the question to the candidates in circumstances of rape, incest, or addiction. And that literally was just something that we kind of came up with. Yeah. Because I think it is I think if we have a reasonable conversation with people, and if we know addiction is a disease now, right? And, even Governor Stitt's wife has been very vocal on, addiction and recovery and those sorts of things as being, something we should talk about, right? Well, if you have a woman who is an addict to an opiate, to an amphetamine, and she determines she's pregnant and she's got, she knows she's not where she wants to be in life to have this child. And she knows that she has an illness that is going to not only affect her life, but the health of the child. Yeah. And it's just a very, I really wonder what people, if they were polled on that, would think. Like, are we saying we should, require this woman to carry this baby to term if she is saying, I know that I'm not where I need to be because I have this, condition that is not easy to address, right? And is going to take some work. I think that even if you put those, I don't know if you put that in statute, but I think that if you really have those conversations with the public, it's not a black and white issue, and I think there's a lot of, I think it would be really interesting to see what voters did.
Right. Yeah. Any other issues that you think are going to be hot on the plate?
Tribal issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was very interesting, Carmen, on January 11th and 12th, Governor Kevin Stitt and Chickasaw Nation Governor Bill Anatubby signed new tobacco taxation and motor vehicle compacts. Those conversations and negotiations have been going on all the way back to this summer. I staked out a meeting, and took blurry pictures from across the street, and some people didn't like that, and I was like, but look, they're actually like talking about it, there's the lawyers. And they got this stuff signed January 11th and 12th, and then crickets. Yeah. There was no discussion of it.
Well, I heard that, through the grapevine that it was, I think that they had wanted to talk to other tribes and not just it be blasted out in the media right away before, there could be a broader discussion amongst tribal leaders of like, oh, hey, we signed these compacts. Here's why. That's what I heard through the grapevine.
That probably makes some sense.
But it was weird.
If the state administration is, actively trying to, make those, make that outreach, which I think they have done a better job lately. Now, again, and this kind of goes to where I wanted to take it, is that the political messaging back is, oh no, he won't negotiate. That's how I even found out that all that meeting was going on back in the summer, was because I knew there were conversations ongoing, and then the Five Tribes Council put out this statement that said Stitt won't negotiate on these compacts, and there was obvious consternation from the Stitt administration, which was like, we are literally like
in negotiations.
Right? We have all these emails back and forth, and I was sort of having this conversation, and I was like, emails, you say, let me
give me those.
I would like to request those. And they chose to give them to me. And then I was like, there's a meeting. I know when the meeting date is. I know who some of the people are. Let me see if I can let me confirm that this meeting's happening, And so I think that you have this political, so the cynical part of me would say, after they wait 7 days, 8 days to announce that. And frankly, just to be clear, neither the state administration nor the Anatubby administration announced the compacts, right? Yeah. The Senate did for some reason that I don't understand. And the Senate announces them, sends them out there. And I'm calling around on the weekend trying to it's sent it out at noon on Saturday. And, confirm that this is really going on, but I can't get a statement from either, an official statement from either governor or anything like that. And neither of them issues any statement until late Monday. Yeah. And in the meantime, Monday afternoon, I get an email from a Chickasaw Nation citizen who's like, I've been talking to some tribal legislators and they say that your story is all false and this is all made up. And I was like, well,
that's because they took the compacts down after they had been posted.
Yeah, did they take them down off the state website?
Well, so they were posted that Friday.
Oh, on SOS.
On the Secretary of State's website. And then I had called the governor's office in the Chickasaw Nation on Friday, and then they took them down. I wasn't the only person calling.
I saw Molly with the Oklahoman had it was records indicate there's a deal, but there was no information. Yes. I guess nobody downloaded them.
Yeah, it was weird that in the week that they, after they had made this agreement and they hadn't posted the agreements yet, that they hadn't come up with sort of a coordinated or even a separate media strategy of like, how are we going to announce this?
Well, and this is my cynical take on it, is that I think that you could make, it could be that sort of the base for both administrations, like the base supporters for both of those leaders, didn't really want this.
I was going to say, so they're in this weird thing where they're actually working together to try to get a resolution to this issue, which is what most of us would want them to be doing. But they can't say we're working together because then they lose support from their electoral base or something, right? That is the craziest thing.
And even Governor Stitt's statement after they did announce that, hey, we signed this agreement with the Chickasaw Nation, it wasn't even like this, we're celebrating. It was like, we got, now we can, adequately turnpike, assess turnpike tolls or whatever, which they were doing before.
And I took that, under the Chickasaw and Choctaw agreements, I took that as a bit of a, subtle reference to the fact that they have concerns with other tribes, car tag.
Kind of trying to force them to the table.
Right. And then I saw yesterday, I think Chief Hoskin with the Cherokee Nation tweeted something that was like, $8 million $1 billion, over the last 20 years have been sent just random. Here's a stat, here's how much and I think it's just so we've reached this point where, as somebody who follows this stuff pretty closely, it is exhausting.
Tedious.
Well, and I'm going to be, honest here for a second that,
not you.
I know, right? Hey, I haven't ranted
Not
today,
yet.
so
We have 7 minutes.
Strap in.
But on one hand, I want to be like, hey, maybe Stitt has actually learned I've got to do some stuff and I've got to cooperate and I've got to negotiate. But then it's like, but I can't tell anybody I'm doing it. I don't want anybody to know I'm doing it for some reason.
But it's the same thing in national politics, though, like Trump getting the COVID shot, right? I mean, I can't tell anybody because I've, riled my base up to believe this one thing or, so fervently.
So it's just like, this should be a positive and we should all be happy that those negotiations were going on and it got an outcome that everybody thinks is going to be relatively positive, or at least as good as we can get. And yet nobody wants to take credit.
Consensus
for it.
and compromise are not part of this politique that we have currently.
No, we can't.
I know you guys are hosting and I'm not asking questions, but I'm going to ask questions and put the spotlight
You're Trey
on you.
Savage. This is the way this goes.
What are pop quiz? What are two things, and there could be more. I just have two in my mind. What are some things that could fundamentally alter this legislative session coming up that we haven't talked about yet, that could totally change the dynamics of what this legislative session ends up being? We're talking state tribal issues. So what would that be?
The Supreme Court ruling on the
Strobel
previous, on Strobel or on this previous, on the compact extension. So they're weighing two different major tribal cases.
Right. Yeah. And I think that, so Carmen got both of them. So we have Strobel versus the Tax Commission, which is the question of income tax, income taxation. And we can come back to that here in a minute, or, on the state's jurisdiction to tax the income of tribal citizens who live and work on their reservations. And then, yes, there's challenges. I don't think it's just on the compact extensions. I think it's on every bill they ran through the concurrent legislative session. And so there's some belief that there could be a situation where the Supreme Court essentially throws out last year's budget.
No. It's I think it's just on the bills that he vetoed, the governor vetoed, and the legislature came back to override in special session because he didn't veto the budget bills, I think. So
he didn't sign the budget bills. Yes, and so, but I think one of the arguments, and so this is where's Tony reality. But I think, because I had the same, I didn't realize that somebody else was explaining to me recently, but I think some of the argument is that it was not appropriate to run those through, to run all of the other budget components that they did through through concurrent session, and which sort of explains why Stitt, he didn't veto them, but he didn't sign them either. And he didn't, because he didn't want to give, credence to the fact that I think this is a legitimate way to do it. So there's some belief that there could be one or more of those things, that get sort of tossed up, and now the legislature ends up having to craft two budgets.
Oh, don't even say that. Don't jinx us like that.
I know. Do we have time to talk Strobel real quick?
Very quickly. Okay, I got my 5-minute notice.
So Alicia Strobel is a Muskogee Creek citizen. She lives and works within the boundaries of Muskogee Nation. I think she derives her income from the tribe. I can't remember off the top of my head. That there are two precedents. I believe that she will prevail in the Supreme Court. I thought that if you looked at the oral arguments, some justices were sort of reaching for what might be a way we could rule in the state's favor. Probably either way, this is going to the U.S. Supreme Court, right? But the state tax code is fairly clear. Now, the state tax code specifically says that you must derive your income from the tribe. Right. But that's pretty clear. And then, of course, the Sack and Fox U.S. Supreme Court ruling from 1991, maybe, I also think is pretty clear. And it doesn't specify from where you derive your income. It's if you if you live and work within reservation boundaries, a state has no income tax jurisdiction over you. And so I think those are pretty straightforward, right? And so now the impact of this, is maybe estimated at $75 million, somewhere therein, potentially, because you've got, just to be clear, the reservations that have been affirmed are the 5 tribes in eastern Oklahoma. You have the Quapaw, you have the Peoria, Miami tribe, I believe, and maybe one other. And so, but then the tribes in western Oklahoma, different treaties, reservation was rejected for the Cheyenne and Arapaho, and other tribes do not have that same standpoint. And so I think, we talked about people have rooting interests, almost like the sportification of politics. Yes. People are either for the tribe, for the, or not, against Stitt, or they're, whatever it would be. But I think it really, from a, not to use the governor's term, but of fairness, I think the Strobel ruling will really set up an interesting standpoint of like, who has to pay income tax, and what all does that cover? And think of it this way: if you had Kevin Stitt, if he lived on the Cherokee Nation within the reservation boundaries, and I don't know that his percentage, I haven't seen his card. Right. That's kind of not. It's kind of frowned upon to ask that sort of thing. But he is a white passing tribal citizen, right? and did not grow up in the culture and all these sorts of things. And he's a wealthy individual. If he would be exempt from state income tax, and yet a full-blood Comanche citizen who works for the Comanche Nation in southwest Oklahoma has to pay tribal income, has to pay state income tax, that's a really, how do we couch that as a society? Right? Especially when you consider that, let's not even say Comanche, which is a sort of a larger tribe of western Oklahoma, but there's a lot of smaller tribes and historically much poorer tribes. And those tribal citizens who, view themselves as culture keepers and, leaders of their tribe's history in a modern context, they have to pay state income tax, but a Kevin Stitt does not. That seems like, if you phrase it like that, it seems really hard to think that that's the way we're going to run society here in Oklahoma, right? And so to that end, that's where, McCall, Eccles, everybody has already said, well, we'll just repeal the income tax for everybody. Right. Yeah. And maybe that's a solution, but then where do we backfill that $500 million?
That's what they're going to have to figure out is
how billions of dollars.
I think it's like multi-billions. Yeah. A lot of money.
Where do we get that come from? Well, we are butting up against the deadline.
Fresh out of time.
I appreciate both Carmen and Trace coming on. This has been a fantastic conversation. It has been.
We'll have you back very soon.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.
There will be no shortage of things to discuss, I'm sure, this year.
Never is.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And remember,
politics is not a spectator sport.
That's right. See you next time.
We
love communication that goes both ways, not just you listening to us pontificate. We would love to hear from our audience. If you have comments, suggestions, or would like to contact us about possibly being a guest on the show, please email notmygeneration@raider.rose.edu.